Bangladesh first. Bangladesh President Mohammad Shahbuddin has announced that an interim government would be formed as soon as possible after dissolving the national parliament. He made the announcement in a televised address to the nation on Monday night, hours after Sheikh Hasina left Bangladesh after resigning as Prime Minister. The president said the decision was taken at a meeting with leaders of different political parties, civil society, representatives and other stakeholders. Chiefs of three forces were present at the meeting. The Bangladesh president said the interim government would conduct the next general election as soon as possible to transfer power to an elected government. President Shahbuddin also ordered the release of all students arrested during the ongoing protests. Bangladesh Army Chief Waqar-uz-Zaman will meet with the representatives of the students and teachers on Tuesday. India is closely monitoring the developments in Bangladesh. The Border Security Force has issued a high alert to all units along the India-Bangladesh border following recent developments in the neighboring nation. In the wake of emerging situation, Air India on Monday cancelled the scheduled operation of flights to and from Dhaka with immediate effect and stated that they are continuously monitoring the situation. Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina tendered her resignation on Monday and left the country. After Hasina left the country, many people entered the Ghana Bhavan, the residence of the Prime Minister. According to media reports, people were seen decamping with various items from public buildings. A crowd was also noticed inside the Parliament building and people were seen taking things from inside the Parliament building as well. The United Nations has called for restraint and urged that formation of an interim government in South Asian nation be democratic after Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina resigned and fled the country. UN Secretary General has urged calm and restraint by all sides and emphasized the importance of a peaceful, orderly and democratic transition.
We're watching the situation in the country very closely. We continue to call for calm and restraint and to urge all parties to respect the right to peaceful assembly and expression. We urge security forces to protect those out on the streets of Dhaka and other cities of Bangladesh. You'll have seen that the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, issued a statement yesterday in which he called for violence in the country to stop. He added that accountability for human rights violations, including those with superior and command responsibility, is crucial. The international community must make it clear that at this pivotal time, there will be no impunity.
All right, indeed, India's Jessica Taneja joins us to give us more information on this. Good morning, Jessica. A lot has happened since yesterday. What is the latest update that you are getting for us?
Well, if you see how the protests have turned out since the weekend on Sunday, more than 100 people died, and that sort of have turned the picture around for our neighboring country, Bangladesh. And you saw how Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, of course, arrived and is now preparing to seek asylum. And those plans, of course, remain further undisclosed as to what decisions is she going to take. But in the recent past and as of today, the visuals that came in yesterday as well of the protesters storming into her residence after she left, of course, looting and ransacking, and of course, parts of the country which have witnessed violence in small places where the police had been heavy-handed with the protesters, and that is how things got literally out of control. And more than 300 people have died so far in these protests. As for the evening, when the announcements were made by the army chief, Waqar-uz-Zaman, who had said that there would be an interim government in place and peace would prevail soon in Dhaka. You saw thousands of protesters on the streets. So it was important to address their concerns as well. And one of their primary concern or the demand being that Sheikh Hasina resign, and that she did yesterday. So this should create some ease on the streets, as the army has said that it won't use force against its own citizens. So that should come as a relief. But the picture still remains grim, because not just Dhaka, but many parts of the country witnessed violent protests and clashes that led to killings and taking of a lot of innocent lives.
Okay. Jessica, now it's been over a month since the country is on a boil, and there were different demands by the protesters. Uh, you know, what was it this time around, Jessica, that got them to the streets again? Same old demand of removing quota system, or there's more to it?
Well, they moved beyond the demand for the quota system because that was taken care by the Supreme Court, where it had scrapped the bill that was initially passed by the High Court. So the legal bit of it was taken care of, and the students were assured that the quota bill will not be presented in the form that the Hasina government had intended to, and in fact made heavy changes in the quota and the job reservation bill that was passed, where 93% was moved to the general category. And even that was contentious because the composition of that seemed to have created some sort of controversy as well. But reduced the quota for the family members or the relatives of the freedom fighters of the Liberation War in 71. That quota had been reduced to nearly 5%, with the 2% remaining for women and minorities and for the specially abled. Now, that was not the point of contention where this turned rather ugly in matter of hours. What did eventually change was there was initially a 9-point demand by the protesters, where the protesters initially being the students who had come out on the streets about a month ago demanding that there be a fair system of job distribution, given the kind of demographic data you're looking at this country. Now remember, Bangladesh, 40% of the population that is between 15 to 20 years is unemployed. And joblessness was a massive issue in a country which is witnessing an inflation of 20%. So things not looking good at this point. But those 9-point demands included, beyond just removal of Sheikh Hasina as Prime Minister, it also demanded that students be ensured that they're not harassed after the quota demand has been scrapped. They be allowed to go back to university. They were demanding resignations of cabinet members, a lot of different ministers, including the education minister, health minister, the law minister. They were also demanding the removal of university officials. So there were comprehensive demands by these protesters, but eventually it boiled down to one. And once that was achieved, there seemed to have been some calm. But the protesters say the injustices done to them and the students that lost their lives, that bit is what picked up for the last wave of movement. And of course, many were also fishing in troubled waters, as you see in Bangladesh. If you've seen the history of Bangladesh, student protests are not new, particularly from Dhaka University. We've seen that in many decades, and especially since the 5 decades that Bangladesh gained its independence. So, of course, situation remains grim, but the protesters have seemed to got one of their important demands. But will they continue to be out in the streets despite the assurances by the president and no less than the army chief, suggesting that the army will not use force against its own citizens and will ensure that justice is brought in sooner?
Well, certainly, Jessica, situation is grim, and protesters, like you just said, they are seeing that injustice is, done to them. But the visuals that we are seeing on the screen is unbelievable. I mean, after Sheikh Hasina left the country, people barged into her residence and also parliament. Now, Jessica, what information do you have as far as the interim government in the country is concerned?
Right, and as soon as the army chief had announced that an interim government will be in place, we're seeing a lot of reports coming out, although unconfirmed, as to how this pans out. What I've been able to pick up so far from various media reports is that the interim government at this point does not include any meetings that have been happening right now from the Awami League. Now, Awami League is the one that was Sheikh Hasina's party and was the current ruling dispensation. And you've seen the kind of anger of protesters against Awami League and its senior members. Their houses have been torched. Many of the ministers' homes have been ransacked again, apart from the Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina herself. And of course, statues have been vandalized by the freedom fighters of the country. that has sort of created a very different image of Bangladesh from what it used to be. Well, given the kind of current circumstances we're looking at, it could be possible that, and there have been suggestions, in fact, being put out there that you could have meetings with the BNP, which is the Bangladesh National Party. Their leaders are in a meeting. I'm not too sure about how much is the involvement of Jamaat in the government formation at this point. But there are again unconfirmed reports suggesting that they have something planned of their own. Apart from that, professors and senior officials of the Dhaka University are also part of the government formation, the interim government, which will be in place for 3 months according to the Bangladesh Constitution. That would ensure some stability till the next elections are held after 3 months. And also what we're hearing is an eminent jurist who previously also saw the UN efforts of Bangladesh. Former Supreme Court Justice could also be part of this government formation. But these are just initial reports, but New Delhi will be watching closely if there are any radical elements who now will take center stage in Bangladeshi politics and try to stir trouble for India, especially when there has been so much investment in projects. Otherwise, in the recent past, between India and the kind of infrastructure development, both in the energy and the connectivity sectors that India had put forth. So India will be watching very closely if there will be other elements that try to fish in troubled waters and create more trouble in the neighborhood.
Okay, Jessica, can you just tell us, you've just told us that what all is being done in the country. Can you just shed some light on what is being done to calm down the crowd? Internet facilities have been completely stopped in the country. What else is being done, to bring back the normalcy to some state?
Well, first an address from the army chief and then by the president seemed to have quieted things down a little bit when it comes to protests on the street. But the anger, of course, is not going to die down very soon as the protesters are resolute in their demands as to what they really want at this point is some form of political stability. A country whose GDP was growing at an average of 6.5 per annum was pretty satisfied with its economic uptake. But with so many people without jobs, there was a certainty that this would sort of transcend into something which would not create normalcy for a very long time. But now it is up to the interim government and whether that interim government formation is acceptable with the student protesters, the ones who initially got out on the streets. But there are also reports that the protests have been foiled, and there have been radical elements who are trying to take control of the protest in order to sort of create some sort of disturbance. But only time will tell whether this government formation and this new normalcy is acceptable with the people or not.
Well, in fact, Jessica, Bangladesh President Mohammad Shahabuddin has announced that an interim government would be formed as soon as possible after dissolving the national parliament. But thank you so much for your analysis. We'll keep taking updates from you since this is developing.